Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Urbane Legends. As you may be able to tell by the art and title for the eagle-eyed, this is one of the classic episodes which I put out between series, so we get a couple of weeks break. I know you might think that we don't need a break and this is all done off the hoof, and why would we need a break? Well, I would say that's none of your business, to be honest, so, wind your neck in. What's been going on with us? Well, I've finally got work, got a job, got a good job, so I know some of you worried about me. A lot of you were reaching out. No one did that, but yes, I've been accepted for a job, and what Neil's been doing. I've not spoken to him. We don't talk between series. He's actually got that written into his contract. He was very, very clear on that. But from what I can tell on the socials, he's just got through the regional Southern Heats for Britain's Strongest Man. So I'm sure you'll join me in wishing him well. Trying to do that, and finally hit that dream. As you'll notice, the intro music today was from Series 2. I think that was the last one that I did fully, including the background stuff, before I got lazy and moved to Epidemic Sounds. They're not sponsoring us. It's very expensive for what it is, don't forget it. But yeah, so the first episode is about a cheeky lightning shooting fella from the Gobi Desert. It's the Mongolian death worm. Take it away, you two crazy cats.
Good call as well.
Talking about swanny whistles and phallic interpretations of things, Neil, this week we're looking at the legend of the Mongolian death worm.
He's this mysterious little fella.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to read a little bit. Do you know what? I'm not going to use Wikipedia this time because there's a lot about it. So I'm going to read from livescience.com, which puts me on edge because of, science. I feel like they're going to be disparaging. But it's by a little fella called Benjamin Radford. So let's see where he goes. Yeah, he's delightful, isn't he? Dancing around with his little cymbals. So, it sounds like a fantastic, lethal creature that may be found in a 1950s pulp science fiction novel, brackets, or sci-fi television movie, close brackets. Didn't need to put that in. More, he's delightful, isn't he?
Referencing June, yeah.
With his little tap shoes.
Oh, he's like the jangle skittering up and down those stairs.
Some people believe that this large, deadly worm-like creature called the Mongolian death worm exists in the Gobi Desert. My second favourite desert.
Yeah? What's your top desert?
Sahara, isn't it?
Yeah,
classic. You can't beat the classics.
Can't beat them, yeah. Come on.
It's called the dunes and that's what we all think of. According to British biologist Carl Schucker, that's weird, he's got the same surname as Tupac. In his book, maybe it is Tupac. Maybe he didn't die and he became
a
British biologist
instead. Yeah.
So, according to Tupac Shakur, in his book, The Unexplained and Illustrated Guide to the World's Most Paranormal Mysteries, 2002 Metro Books, one of the world's most sensational creatures may be concealed amid the stands of the southern Gobi Desert. It's said to resemble a large fat worm up to 1 meter, 3 foot long, and dark red in colour, with spike-like projections at both ends. Spends much of its time hidden beneath the desert sands, but whenever one is spotted lying on the surface, it is scrupulously avoided by the locals. So, first things first. Doesn't sound that big. A meter.
No, when you mentioned the Mongolian death worm,
I thought it was going to be
pictures.
Tremors.
I was exactly. I was very much picturing the graboids from Tremors, sort of like something 50 foot long.
Yeah.
Or sandworms from June.
But does this make it more realistic. The fact that it's not bombastic.
Well, that's true. Yeah. If it was big enough for Paul Atreides to hitch a ride, it's probably you would have spotted it a bit more often.
If it was the size of, say,
New York.
London Underground, if it was the size of, say, Mars,
it would interfere gravitationally with the rest of the planet. So yeah, that feels intrinsically unrealistic.
Or is it? Or maybe a vortex is counterbalancing it.
Yeah,
It's an eldritch god.
Yeah.
So, according to the legend, the dreaded Mongolian death worm, which local people call, and here we go, Olgoi, Korkoi, or loosely translated, large intestine worm.
Is that local death worm? Translated
local intestine worm. So,
okay.
their frame of reference for worms is intestinal worms. Lovely. It has lived up to its name. It can kill in several fearsome ways, Neil. Would you like to guess some of these ways?
And
remember, it can't handle a gun.
Oh, right, okay. That's got you stumped. Can it call down a really localised nuclear strike like in Civ 4? Only like 4 squares of the map it can.
That's not one of the ones. It's
I spent one of 6 hours waiting to drop one on Gandhi because he kept nagging at me. So wait, just after I've invented rock and roll, you're getting a nuclear bomb. Wow,
one comes after the other.
Yeah.
No. So its ways of killing include spitting.
Let me guess some other ones then. Okay, so it's not nuclear weaponry.
Not a nuclear weaponry based on the mechanic, the learning tree mechanics of Civ 4. Yeah. No.
Can it spit poison in your eye?
Something like that.
Ooh,
so
okay.
it can spit a stream.
So it couldn't swallow you.
Well, don't know. Apparently the locos can. And they're only little, aren't they?
Just to stand their jaw.
Got to remember, it's a worm, so it's got no bones.
Yeah,
it's not. It's not. As I constantly curse to the gods about being restricted by having a skeleton, it doesn't have that restriction.
Cage. Yeah.
Lucky bastard. So it spits a stream of corrosive venom that is lethal to anything it hits. And if that doesn't do the trick, it's said to be able to electrocute victims from a distance.
Oh, good. It's got some steel action going on as well. Oh, you can electrocute from a distance. You can shoot lightning at you like a Lord of Thunder.
Yeah.
Like Thor.
Yeah.
They did that Loki series. I don't know if you saw it, but there was like loads of different versions of Loki, like an alligator Loki. So this sounds like do you reckon this is like a worm Thor?
Maybe. But I think this legend's older.
The worm god of thunder.
Than the 2021 series Loki on Marvel TV.
The recent Marvel series, yeah. Fair enough.
Recently, rarely seen and never photographed. It was, it's pretty, it's not a heavily populated area, the Mongolian plateau and the Gobi Desert, is it? And they also are nomadic.
Yeah, I'm assuming around that area it's nomadic. I mean, there's not all of Mongolia, presumably, is.
All of it is.
Is it? All of the people
even the capital cities, like on legs, like some sort of steampunk thing.
Oh, right. Yeah, like a game I played once where they're
moving to
walk around. Yeah, it's convenient, isn't it?
Yeah.
Steampunk for you, Chris. You know my feelings about steampunk.
You love it as much as I do.
Over-engineered nonsense.
No, I think
imagine the maintenance.
Well, there's a lot of maintenance with everything, isn't there?
Well, imagine if it was a building that had legs and they could walk to places. Wouldn't need to go around so much then, would you? The kids just come to you.
Well, how do you decide where to go? It doesn't matter. Well, I mean, there is an argument to be said, would you use more coal and, more engineering in having a walking city than you would having a city where everyone individually had to heat their homes in the winter. Whereas if you just follow the temperate weather, you don't have to have every house have an individual heating element. So what uses more, Neil? What uses more?
They could be solar powered then as well. So there you go.
That's not steampunk!
Oh, right, yeah, sorry. Got to have a little chimney, isn't it?
Have a little chimney.
And a little railway.
Little railway. Toot toot. Little magnifying glass.
Skellington riding the railway. With some goggles on his top hat.
Exactly. Got to, have replacement limbs with, monkey wrenches, steam-powered monkey wrench, something like that.
Huh? A fork in place of a thumb.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Basically, Inspector Gadget, but with a chimney.
But shitter. That's something.
So, but, it electrocutes its victims from a distance, so that's pretty...
That's hardcore. I like that.
That's pretty hardcore. So, rarely seen and never photographed, it was mentioned in the 1926 book by paleontologist Roy Chapman Andrews, who didn't believe in existence but noted the stories of it circulated in Mongolia. Okay, this bit's called Seeking the Death Worm.
Nice.
Despite, or perhaps because of, the creature's fearsome name, they don't call it the Mongolian happiness worm after all. Don't start. Look, just Benjamin.
He's just having a bit of fun. Look,
but he should stick to his, his little organ.
He's just a little pirouette. It was gorgeous.
His little accordion that he dances with.
He's standing on his head there.
Little hat on. Many intrepid explorers have set out into the Gobi Desert seeking the beast. Numerous organised expeditions and searches have been made over the years by both independent researchers and in conjunction with television shows. Despite
So, hang on a second, Chris. You say independent researchers. Do you mean that no august bodies of science have funded these expeditions?
Yeah, but, that doesn't mean anything, does it?
No.
What does
They're
that
just
mean?
going for the mainstream stuff, aren't they?
Oh, it's boring.
Yeah. Cancer and all that.
Yeah, but,
Let's go and find a Mongolian death worm.
Yeah, but they're not into cryptozoology, are they? Because essentially they have to be
all fake.
Because their funds have to be auditable to their donors. They can't go, we went to go and look for the chupacabra. It costs
like jolly.
It costs $150,000. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Or independently fund it. And the good thing about independently researching it as well is you don't have all that politicking going on.
No, exactly.
People trying to get tenure.
Needing to provide evidence and stuff.
People trying to get into, alpha, gamma, omega, or whatever.
It's just ego, isn't it? Locker room stuff.
It's all locker room stuff. Slapping each other's asses, whatever. So despite the extensive searches, eyewitness interviews, and even setting traps for the beast, all have come back empty-handed. Many of those who believe in the creature's existence, acknowledge that there's no hard evidence, but instead believe that the legends and the stories of them must have some basis in historical truth. The descriptions, mostly second and third hand stories from different places and times, are too similar, they believe, to be anything but independent eyewitness reports. Eye in the sky. From a folkloric perspective, however, this is simply a sign that legends and stories of a death worm may have spread through the region, as commonly happens through trade and travel. Many people around the world can offer very similar descriptions of dragons, leprechauns, mermaids, and other fantastic, presumably non-existent creatures. Sorry, where around the world...
Leprechauns don't exist?
Well, yeah, there's that.
I'm not having that.
And
there's movie Proof with Warwick Davis.
And to be fair, that's disrespectful to a group of people who are... very well respected in the Republic of Ireland, the leprechaun.
Had to fight hard for their rights to the leprechaun community.
So many people around the world can offer similar descriptions of leprechauns. Where else are there leprechauns?
I think that is very much endemic to Ireland.
It's a very much one place in the world that they say it.
Dragons are all over, in fairness.
Yeah, dragons, fine, because they find dinosaur bones everywhere. I mean, dragons probably exist. So, and other fantastic, presumably non-existent creatures, not from personal experience, but from hearing about them from others. So, is there a real animal behind the stories and legends? It seems doubtful. Compared to the North American Bigfoot or the Himalayan Yeti, for which there are dozens or hundreds of alleged footprints, photographs, for example, there's virtually no evidence of its existence. Yeah, but again...
It's in the Gobi Desert.
And it lives underground.
Tracks, is it? Yeah.
This guy...
Oh, what's he like?
He should stick...
Well, you want a footprint?
He should stick to doing his little diving act off that little, 10-foot-high diving board that he does into the wash tub.
That's good, that.
It's good, isn't it? He comes out with all his fur wet.
Yeah.
Considering shaking it off. Considering also that no live or dead ones have been found, every other creature known to exist has left behind a dead body or a skeleton. But again, it's a worm, so it doesn't have a skeleton.
They've only found one dead Bigfoot, and it was into Grifter's freezer. That wasn't terribly.
Which was,
we've talked about this before.
Yeah, which was just...
It wasn't terribly convincing.
It was a bear with a mask on.
Yeah.
In fact, the Gobi would likely preserve carcasses of the animal due to the relative lack of predators.
Harder than it looks.
And hot desert winds that slow decomposition. But again, it's a worm.
Maybe it can change into different creatures. Maybe. I thought of that.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I'm fair enough. You're sceptical, but I mean, the things that he's being sceptical about are things that could easily be explained away. So he's not doing his case any justice. So inhabitants of the Gobi, and how long do you think, in a desert with hot winds and, even if you don't have loads of predators around, like dogs or whatever, there are still predators, birds and stuff. And also, how long do you think it would take a worm to decompose? A couple of days? It's a huge desert. Inhabitants of the Gobi are aware of the global interest in their mystery monster, as well as offer rich rewards for one of the creatures, live or dead, and if one was found, it would surely come to light. Well, they're not capitalists. They're not capitalists, they're nomads.
I'm not sure there is a great demand for a dead Mongolian death worm either, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
It's a very lucrative industry. What are you going to do with it? Unless it turns out it makes oil or something. Then we'll go and invade Mongolia on a spurious pretext.
Bomb them out of existence.
Yeah, you've got to free the death worms.
Legends and evidence, Neil. A zoological perspective may help us to sort fact from fiction in the legend of the Mongolian death worm. First of all, we should not be misled by the worm in its name. That's an English translation, guy. The creature, if it exists in the inhospitable Gobi Desert, could not be a soft, fleshy worm. Instead, it's likely to be a type of snake or legless lizard. He's basing this on nothing. This also means it would be a vertebrate animal with a spine that would presumably be found by searchers. He's just backfilling stuff. He's got no evidence for any of this.
Well, maybe it's based on the local animals. I don't know. Maybe that's what you would need to be able to glide through the sand.
A variety of explanations have been offered for the animal, including perhaps misidentification of a new species of snake. Snake that can shoot lightning? Don't think so, mate. The consensus amongst researchers such as Tupac Shakur and author Richard Freeman is that the Mongolian death worm likely does not exist, and belief in it is instead based upon sightings of either a type of limbless reptile known as a worm lizard, which resembles a large worm, burrows underground and can reach several feet in length, or a type of sand boa snake.
Well, Tupac Shakur says it, and I'm.
Oh, yeah, if he says it. Of course, not all the characteristics of the worm, lizard or sand boa are a perfect match for the death worm. For example, terrestrial snakes can't deliver lethal electric shocks the way that electric eels, which are actually fish, not eel, for example, can. But what? Electric eels, which are actually fish, not eels. But eels are a type of fish. This he's getting a muddle here. Eels are a type of fish. For that matter, several venomous snakes, primarily cobras and vipers, can spit poison which, although not acidic, can certainly cause harm and blindness. Yet these reputed characteristics are based not on hard data but myths and stories. Some accounts of the deathworm even claim that its venomous spittle can corrode metal instantly, which is physically impossible. With allowances made for the exaggerations found in rumour, legend and folklore, the worm, lizard or sand snake seems a likely candidate. It's of course possible that the Mongolian deathworm exists. Of course, there would have to be more than one of them to say what biologists call breeding population, likely tens or hundreds of thousands of them. Perhaps next week, next month or next year, such a bizarre creature will be found and examined by scientists. Until then, it seems likely that Roy Chapman Andrews' assessment nearly a century ago was correct. The creature's merely a legend.
Maybe.
Oh, here we go. Benjamin Radford is deputy editor of the Skeptical Inquirer Science magazine. He's the bad science columnist for Live Science. So he's come in there with an attitude.
Yeah.
Not one I like either. He's got a closed mind. He's bigoted against Mongolian deathworms. So what are you thinking so far, Neil?
I think he's working for Uzbekistan harbin fish industry.
So we've got some more stuff here. So we've got one on cryptids.fandom.com, which is, to be fair, a much more even-handed
this is always
resource.
The thing with cryptozoology, isn't it? Is because
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, but you don't know. Some, as that wise man said in Harry and the Hendersons, have you ever seen a baby pigeon?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Pigeons. My mum had some pigeons.
Him because that was his big thing. He's like,
have you ever?
They exist?
What, baby pigeons?
Well, because pigeons exist, and therefore you'd have to obviously.
No, but I mean, but that's a really weird. I mean, pigeons.
Either Harry and the Hendersons, one of those films. Somebody could go, nobody's ever seen it yet. We've ever seen a baby pigeon?
Yes. Pigeons nested on my mum's balcony. I haven't seen a baby pigeon, but people have seen baby pigeons. Yeah, they nested on my mum's balcony and they hatched some baby pigeons.
Look, it wasn't a great argument.
So, cryptids. So let's see what they've got to say. So the Mongolian deathworm, native name Olgoi Kurokoi, which means intestine worm, due to its red blood-like colour and size, which is the size of an intestine. It has been described by many to be between 2 and 7 feet long, to have the ability to spit out corrosive yellow saliva, and to generate blasts of electricity. We know all this. However, the latter power is thought of as being folkloric by the nomads of the Gobi. Western culture comes to call it the Mongolian deathworm. So it's believed to be a giant worm, and it covers its prey with an acidic substance that turns everything a corroded yellow colour. And then the legend says that the creature begins to attack. It raises half of its body out of the sand and starts to inflate. What? Oh, okay. Until it starts to inflate until it explodes. What? So I've got to go through. Mongolian nomads believe that the giant worm covers its prey with an acidic substance that turns everything a corroded yellow colour. Legends say that as the creature begins to attack, it raises half of its body out of the sand and starts to inflate until it explodes, releasing the lethal poison all over its unfortunate victim. The poison is so venomous that the prey dies instantly. Livestock and humans are supposed to be its main prey.
It's an inefficient way of hunting, I would say. Using yourself as the...
suicide bomb.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe if one of them does, the rest of the pack can feed afterwards.
Maybe. Because Mongolia had been under Soviet control until 1990, very little was known about the deathworm in the West. In recent years, investigators have been able to look for evidence of the creature's existence. Ivan Makiri, I think it's just Ivan Mackle, one of the leading Loch Ness monster detectives. Oh, well, there's just sign of quality.
Yeah.
Studied the region and interviewed many Mongolian people about.
Sorry, no, we've got to pause. No, sorry, Chris, we've got to pause there.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to know what differentiates a leading Nessie hunter from a crap Nessie hunter.
I think it would be.
Neither of them have found Nessie, and they know where to look in the Loch Ness.
But I think it would be someone who can afford to spend more time doing it.
Yeah,
perhaps is better at grifting investment.
I'm sceptical about that.
So, due to the sheer volume of sightings and strange deaths, he came to the conclusion, unsurprisingly, that it was more than just a legend. Nobody is entirely sure what the worm is. Experts are certain it's not a real worm because the Gobi Desert is too hard. Not too hard. It's too hot an area for an annelid to survive. Some have suggested it might be a skink, but they have little legs and scaly skin, whereas witness accounts specify the worm is limbless and smooth-bodied. The most probable explanation is that the deathworm is a new species of Amphibonaea, or worm lizard, a group of burrowing reptiles. Although native Mongolian people are convinced of the deathworm's nature, it will take many more years of research to satisfy the rest of the world's scientific community. In 2005, an expedition from the Centre of 14 Zoology crossed 1,000 miles of Gobi on the track of a deathworm. They concluded it was probably a large unknown type of worm lizard, and the powers attributed to it were apocryphal. So, in entertainment, the main antagonists in the Tremors series, called graboids, were based upon the deathworm.
Really?
There you go, yeah. The deathworm did make an appearance on Lost Tapes when a pack of deathworm attacked a couple of ATV riders who were stranded in the Mongolian desert. In the 2010 sci-fi original movie, Mongolian Deathworm.
They've made a movie about this premise, haven't they? I've seen this.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the movie.
Worms are seen as gigantic slug-like creatures with extendable jaws and an ability to climb wall. The worms in this movie don't have the ability to shock or spit acid, unlike the traditional legend says. And in the popular game, Ark Survival Evolved, as part of the Scorched Earth DLC, they add the Deathworm, who is a huge worm taller than a T-Rex with leg-like appendages by the mouth and is able to bite and claw. So, the background, it says type worm, first sighting 1,000 years ago, last sighting unknown, country Mongolia, Middle East, Asia, North Africa, population small, habitat underground deserts.
And the Gobi.
So, what are you thinking so far?
I'm primarily thinking it's probably all bullshit, but it's possible that there might. I mean, obviously, it sounds like you couldn't have a worm-like creature out in that environment. I think that's been stated a couple of times now, so that sort of makes sense. It's too hot and dry, just dump me. I can imagine there'd be like some bigger snakes that you might, give rise to some sort of legend. I mean, I think the thing is, its characteristics are ones that you would
fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, I love the story. I love the fact that it can spit out acid and fire lightning from sort of quite a way, and then apparently comes out and explodes acid all over you, like some like.
Well, we've heard that
aliens. So that's great, but it doesn't sound like any of the kind of like actual sightings or anything concurred with this.
But what I would say to just to give people an idea, because not everyone might know how big the Gobi Desert is. It's 1.295 million square kilometres. So 1.295 million kilometres squared. So that's a big old area to be finding a 3-foot worm, isn't it? Of mainly uninhabited areas.
Yeah, but if you're, if they kind of, if we're saying that there's been quite a few sightings by the local populace, then you think you'd knock up those ones in a way. I don't know. I mean, yeah. Look, I'll say this much: it'd be good fun if you did find one, wouldn't it?
Would it?
One in the eye for the establishment.
Oh,
stick
right.
Well, you pipe and smoke it. Yeah, you'd be like, yeah, told you. What's this then? Eh?
So you'd like mainly to find it for some kind of political
some
reason.
Twisted egotism. Yeah, you doubted me. Have a look at this.
Right.
Plus, I'm going to use to sort of power electric cars. Generate its own electricity, that could come in handy.
So I think that let's have a look at this. I think basically we've got the gist of what it is. I don't think there's going to be... I mean, a lot of different people have written about it.
A film which looks like they just like the title Mongolian Deathworm and didn't really care about any of the substance.
But, I mean, the Gobi Desert, I mean, it says here, Gobi Desert's vast region expands a territory of 500,000 square miles of rough terrain, making the existence of undiscovered animal species very likely, and I'd agree with that. It's one of the most remote areas on Earth, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's entirely possible that there are 5 foot undiscovered snake-like creatures knocking about, but ones that spit.
There are worms. There are worm. Do you know what I might? So there's also, against what they were previously we've read, there are worm species that have been known to live in sand instead of soil, like the giant beach worm in Australia. So, moreover, the worms in the circulatory system a worm's circulatory system functions by absorbing oxygen through their skin and carrying it through their body, which allowed them to grow to large sizes. So, it's less unlikely than, the naysayers have said, biologically. I mean, obviously, the shooting lightning thing is unlikely biologically, but
that was less likely.
That a worm could live in hot sand and stuff. Well, they do. They already do. So I think that really we've
looking at Wiki as well, and apparently in '83 they had a specimen of a Tartar sand boa, which is like a big snake, basically. They showed it to some locals who'd seen the Olgoi Korkoi, and they confirmed that was the animal that they called the Mongolian deathworm. Now, obviously, that was just a particular set of people, so it doesn't mean the whole, But yeah, it's possible. Yeah. I mean, look, it's one of two things, isn't it? It feels to me it's possible that there's something that nobody's actually spotted other than the locals. It's possible that they've mistaken a snake for something else, and like hunter's tales. It's like the old fisherman's tales, isn't it? It's gotten a bit more embellished in the telling, where I
think it's unlikely that
spitting poison and.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely it exists with what they're, in the format which they're saying. I think that's unlikely. But then I'm also kind of slightly pushed in the other direction by people going, oh, well, I don't think it can exist, and here are the reasons why. And then you actually look at the reasons why and you go, but similar animals do exist in those circumstances. So you've got a lot of people who are going, oh, well, I reckon it's rubbish. And that's fair enough. You can think that. But then when they try and put kind of science behind it, then you look and their science is completely bullshit. Then it kind of, then I'm more on the side of the locals at that point kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? I'm kind of put off by that kind of stuff.
Well, you know me, I'm more than happy to support some unsubstantiated rumours if you can make a bit of profit out of it. So if they want to set up a theme park for Mongolian deathworms or whatever,
get tourists
involved, I'd be well up for it.
Well, and on the original version of the computer game theme park, the most popular ride was always the worm ride.
There you go.
And you just make loads of money on those. So, yeah, exactly. So just set up loads of them.
They could have one of those Mongolian
one-way system.
Maybe,
yeah, exactly.
You could fry up some death worm.
Do some wrestling, Mongolian wrestling.
Nice.
Beautiful. Have some Genghis Khan theme stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean that was huge back in the day. The old
well, apparently
horde.
Isn't something like 1 in 10 people in the world meant to be his ancestor?
Got some genetic relation to Genghis Khan
because he got around so much.
He certainly did. Yeah.
So Neil, let's have a little go through our system. So
I reckon that was why Glenhall was so successful, because they had, Mongolian death worms, train them up and get them to attack their enemies.
Flung them into cities.
Mobile archery, yeah. Nobody could withstand. That was the secret sauce.
They use it, so they tipped the arrows in the Mongolian death worm venom.
Nice. So then you had electrical arrows as well.
Maybe that was it. They just fired electricity. They had them like over their shoulders, like bazookas.
The producers on that film should have been taking notes from this. Much better ideas.
Well,
Khan involved.
I would imagine that with the name of that film's probably already copyright's probably already gone on it, so we can always do a film called The Mongolian Death Worm.
Yeah, I'm keen to start with a pitch.
Oh, Neil. And it's always interesting, these cryptozoology ones. So, Neil, you can go first with Spookina. Well, that was something that certainly existed. There's no denying that. So the next episode coming up is a little bit different. It's about an American vampire tale. Quite famous one. So please enjoy the story of living in the arse end of New England, a lack of medical knowledge, and eating hearts. Yes, of course, it's Mercy Brown. So, talking about things changing, today we're going to look at a vampire story, which isn't from Eastern Europe, the traditional home of the vampires. It's from Rhode Island, and we're looking at the Mercy Brown vampire incident. So, what do you think so far, Neil? You like vampires, don't you? Couldn't eat a whole one.
No, absolutely. Yeah, they're one of your top tier monsters you want to hang around with. I think they're a bane, much like.
Wouldn't mind having a pint with one. Yeah, they're like Nigel Farage.
Yeah, right? Somebody I probably would desperately avoid having a pint with. To be honest with you,
come on, you feel like Boris, he seems all right.
You'd had rather a pint with Boris than Nigel Farage, but
really,
yeah, no. I would avoid both, frankly.
What about Trump? Go pint with him.
He's going to talk about himself. It'd be the same thing with It'd be the same thing with all of them. They just talk about themselves.
But I would have thought that hanging around with me for however many years it's been would have given you training for that.
Oh, you're on that spectrum. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, doesn't mean I actively seek out more of it.
Now, that's why we only talk to each other once a week, and under the guise of a podcast nowadays. I was going to get it court mandated, but it seems to be working out, so we stick to these boundaries. We'll keep the relationship going. Okay, so a few points there for me. So interesting in that, obviously, a lot of Europeans settled in America, but didn't really know there was kind of like, and what's interesting is just having had a quick look at this. There being some sort of vampire folklore in America. Hadn't have thought that was, hadn't thought it travelled too far out of Eastern Europe, to be honest with you. Obviously, Bram Stoker wrote wrote Dracula, and a lot of stuff came out of that. But I wasn't aware that was kind of like a big part of American folklore. I think that vampires, or sort of, call them what you will, sort of blood-sucking humanoids, are probably quite. I mean, like there's Chinese vampires, isn't there? So, I think that
that's true. Actually, yeah, you have the sort of hoppy vampires.
I think they're cross-cultural. And Brian Stoker, pulled on resources to do his novel, but it's not the same as like, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, where she just sort of came up with this.
Yeah, that was invented.
It was invented. Yeah. This is something which I think is a fairly broad thing. I wouldn't be surprised if like native people of America, the First Nation, whatever, have a version of like a sort of night walker or something. I think they probably do, like that kind of gets people at night. I think it's probably a fairly broad church, the
Which is
vampiric
entirely
tradition.
possible, and a lot of this seems to come down to sort of like some level of superstition, which, obviously has nothing to do with the modern day.
So,
we'll get into that later.
Let's get into this. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of Wikipedia, and then we're going to dig in to Mercy Brown. Mercy Brown. So the Mercy Brown vampire incident occurred in Rhode Island, US in 1892. It's one of the best documented cases of the exhumation of a corpse in order to perform rituals to banish an undead manifestation.
I'm just going to immediately need to address that as well, Chris. So one of the... This is something that happens. Yeah, it's top 10, maybe. It's not right. Really good exhumation.
There's no fireworks.
I'll be honest with you.
They didn't get a celebrity to do it.
You've kind of left it too late there, haven't you? If you're having to exhume the corpse to banish evil spirits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Unless you know that. We don't know. Let's see if there's any explanation behind.
I'm jumping to conclusions. Maybe they were right all along.
Well,
from the end of this podcast,
I think the little break that you had from doing the analytical work that we do has led to your mind slipping dangerously into the reactionary. So
horrors of subjectivism.
So the incident was part of the wider New England vampire panic. Whee! So we'll have a little dive into that afterwards as well.
I need to understand what that is.
So several cases.
We're in Boston?
No, we're in...
New England, is that Boston?
Well, it is New England, but Boston's Connecticut, isn't it? And this is Rhode Island, which is near, but, there's all those little small states that are kind of north of...
I'll be honest with you, in my head, this is just a load of people speaking like Bostonians. Mark Wahlberg or something.
Hey, she's a vampire!
Yeah.
So, several cases of consumption, or as we know it, tuberculosis, occurred in the family of George and Mary Brown in Exeter, Rhode Island. Friends and neighbours believe this was due to the influence of the undead. An attempt was made to remediate. That's the end of that sentence. She died January 1982, aged 19. So let's have a little bit of the history from Wikipedia. Hopefully the full article, which I'm going to read, doesn't... Actually, I'm just going to do the full article. That'll do, Wikipedia. So this is from allthat'sinteresting.com, and it was checked by Jacqueline Anglis. So it is called Why the Mercy Brown Case Remains One of History's Craziest Vampire Incidents. When Mercy Brown's family started dying off...
The people always say this is one of the greatest exhumation stories. You're like, show me the other ones.
Yeah, it's just clickbait stuff, isn't it? Like, that's why.
If you've got more of these, if you've got a top 10, I'd like to see it. And I genuinely mean that.
Well, that's why I have joked, thumbing my nose at internet culture in our description of the podcast. I've got welcome to the hottest podcast about urban legends. So when Mercy Brown's family started dying off one by one, the town blamed her, even though she'd been dead for months.
That wouldn't stop her. No better than she ought to be.
The police were in their infancy in Exeter, Rhode Island at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Yeah,
they weren't the most logical group of people, obviously.
No. So the
suspect died 2 months ago. That doesn't mean we can rule them out.
You could buy an.
I've been to detective school. I'm not fucking disagree with you.
You can buy an alibi. So
they're undead. What if they're a wizard or witch, whatever? Yeah.
Well, they like all the witches and stuff in New England, or they did anyway, didn't they, at the start? So, in 1892, tuberculosis was the leading cause of death in the United States. Then known as consumption, its symptoms included fatigue, night sweats, and the coughing up of white phlegm or even foamy bloods. I mean, that just sounds normal to me.
Yeah, I mean that's a Saturday morning.
Yeah. I knew I should have stuck to 40 a day yesterday.
But, consumption. I mean, we had the big sort of TB hospices and stuff, didn't we? You find with quite a lot of like big old buildings, there was some TB ward or something where people were basically left to die effectively.
Yeah.
Because pre-antibiotics, then that was probably your prognosis. You were either going to recover or you were going to probably more pass away.
So there was no cure or reliable treatment for TB. I'm going to shorten it to TB. Physicians often recommended that a patient affected by the disease should rest, eat well, and exercise outdoors. Of course, these home remedies were rarely successful. People with active tuberculosis has an 80% chance of dying from the illness.
There you go.
The terror surrounding such gruesome death helps explain the madness that befell the small town of Exeter, Rhode Island, at the end of the 19th century. Residents began to fear a vampire named Mercy Brown was causing consumption-related deaths in the town, even though she was already dead from the same disease. Not going to stop her. Task-focused.
Proves it, if anything.
Well, it's got a nice...
Exactly what a vampire would do. Pretend to die.
It's got a nice illustration here of someone using mesmerism, aka hypnosis, which was a common early treatment for TB.
Yeah, I mean... I wonder if Mesmer proposed that as the... Do you think it was just a psychological condition? And it just reminds me a bit. It's one of the early stories of Freud, where he was doing his sort of psychoanalytical sort of techniques, and there was some woman on the couch, and he's like, oh, he thought that some issue she had with her nose was something all in her head
to do with her father.
Anyway, it turned out she'd had some botched surgery, and they'd left some surgical gauze up there, and she nearly died of a brain hemorrhage.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't remember the full facts of the story, but he was sitting there thinking it was like trying to figure out some interpretation. For what's going on there. But
that's the thing with Freud, isn't it? He's been widely discredited.
Oh no, I mean a lot of the stuff. I mean, I knew a friend years ago who worked for the NHS, and he, a lot of Freudian theory is still very current and psychoanalysis, but obviously, there's not everything is. Has that
not everything means you want to have sex with your parents.
Cause. Sometimes it's a physical thing. Oh yeah, I mean, I don't. There's. I think like some of the cases and some of it are the evidence is a bit thing. Is not as rigorously peer reviewed as it should have been, but
I think
it still uses. It's still a foundation of a lot of psychoanalytical theory, as I understand. But I don't. No, just because a friend of mine is he worked in mental health in the NHS, and I was like, when I was in my 20s, kind of like, oh yeah, a lot of that fraud stuff being debunked. Well, no, actually, quite a lot of it is still the basis.
Yeah, I think the kindest thing I could say is that psychiatry is still in its infancy as a science. That's what I would say to it, as someone who's been to psychiatrists and stuff. It all started when it was, smooth segue into that. It's not dark. It was just like, like New York.
Oh, no.
Like New Yorkers go and see a psychiatrist.
No, there's nothing wrong with
go for counselling and that kind of stuff. I've never found it useful. But there we go. It all started when a farmer named George Brown lost his wife, Mary Eliza, to TB in 1884. 2 years after the death of his wife, his oldest daughter died of the same illness. Before long, tragedy would strike the Brown family again. As the family members died one by one, people began to suspect the reason was something far more sinister than disease. The rest of George Brown's family appeared to be in good health until his son, Edwin, became seriously ill in 1891. He retreated to Colorado Springs in the hope that he would recover in a better climate. Is Colorado Springs better climate than Rhode Island? Don't know. Mountain air, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know how polluted it would have been in those days, but
I can't imagine it. I think
stuff. I thought the weather. I don't know. Actually. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of it was less built up, and it was kind of in the mountainy area, so maybe cleaner air. But whereas stuff like fog from the sea, people would think was bad for you and stuff back in those days, wouldn't they? And Rhode Island's obviously on the Atlantic coast.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, you way back when you did have kind of like stagnant water and stuff. I mean, obviously not from the sea, as you say, but stagnant water was a precursor to sort of
Yes.
Because the drained the marshes whenever they made the encampment.
Yeah, malair.
Yeah, malaria. Yeah.
However, he returned to Exeter in 1892 in an even worse state. Oh no! I had to remortgage the house to get you out there. Within the same year, Edwin's sister, Mercy Lena Brown, died from TB when she was 19 years old. And with Edwin deteriorating rapidly, his father began to grow increasingly desperate, which you can understand. But it sounds like he had a lot of kids. Meanwhile,
insurance policy, they're all dying off of consumption.
Yeah, you got to knock them out.
Assume about 60% of them aren't going to make it through the week.
Needs to get injected up with seahorse DNA like I did. Meanwhile, several concerned townspeople kept telling George Brown about an old folk tale. The superstition claims that, by some unexplained and unreasonable way, in some parts of the deceased relative's body's live flesh and blood may be found what is supposed to feed on the living and who are in feeble health. Now, that's a strange sentence. Let's go through that. Couldn't follow it. Let's go again. By some unexplained and unreasonable way, in some part of the diseased relative's body's live flesh and blood may be found. So they're saying that. Saying that a part of the dead person might still be alive.
Yeah. So are they saying that somebody gets TB and then turns into a vampire? Is that what's happening?
No. So what they're saying is, by some unreasonable, by some unexplained and unreasonable way, in some part of the diseased relative's body's live flesh and blood may be found, which is supposed to feed on the living who are in feeble health. Basically, the myth claims that when members of the same family tree waste away from consumption, it might be because one of the deceased is draining the life force from the living relatives.
Okay, so I get this bit, which is, I'm not quite sure what... It sounded like they were referring there was some part of the body, whatever, which actually is ironically a bit like autoimmune disease, but anyway. So, I don't know what's...
They're saying that someone who's died of...
Yeah, no, it's this notion, isn't it? So, yeah, it's that classic vampiric thing where, people around somebody are dying and they're sucking their life force out or whatever.
Yeah.
So, the literal thing would be through blood, but, it could be some kind of psychic
Psychic vampires, yeah.
Yeah, through mesmerism, perhaps.
Perhaps through mesmerism. Well, vampires famously can use mesmerism, can't they?
Absolutely.
Get you to do stuff. Go to the shops for me.
First practitioners of it.
Go and get me a packet of fags now.
Get me 20 pence and a
pepperami.
Yeah, and a pepperami. And some Brannigans. They don't do Brannigans anymore. Take a name for it.
Go and find me some Brannigans. But if you have to go more than a mile, don't bother. I'll have some McCoys.
Yes.
And a can of Lilt.
No wonder the vampires are angry. You can't, McCoys are no substitute.
Go to the co-op and get me a Ginster's monkey and onion pie. A local newspaper reported, Mr. Brown did not place much credence in the old-time theory and resisted their impunities until Wednesday, when the bodies of the wife and two daughters were exhumed. An examination had under the direction of Harold Metcalf, MD of Wickford. Got him all the way over.
So he's come a cropper there, hasn't he? They've tried to advise him with the cutting-edge medical science. Your daughter's probably a vampire, mate. We'll sort this one out.
We're going to pick her up. We're going to dig her up, shove a stake in her.
He thought he'd do his own research. And look what's happened. You've got a vampire daughter now. It's killing off your family.
Indeed. The crypt where Mercy Brown was likely interned. It just looks like a little cow shed, something like that. Indeed, on the morning of March 17th, 1892, a doctor and some locals exhumed the bodies of each family member who had died of TB. They found skeletons in the graves of Brown's wife and eldest daughter. However, the doctor found that the 9-week-old remains of Mercy Brown looked startlingly normal and undecayed.
Case closed. Clear vampire.
Burn it.
I'll be honest with you, American vampires are a bit shitter than European ones by the sound of it. So you kill off your family with consumption and then just decay a bit less.
Yeah, a little bit less decay.
It wouldn't have made a great novel. I'm just going to say I don't think Bram Stoker would have made quite so many films.
The boring vampires.
If this is the kind of mythology that he put together.
So, furthermore, blood was found in Mercy Brown's heart and liver. This seemed to confirm local fears that Mercy Brown was some kind of vampire who'd been sucking the life from her living relatives. But Neil...
Again, why is she dead?
Well, it doesn't mean it was pumping.
I mean, it's a bit less... Well, no, precisely, but it's like... Yeah, so you found some blood. I mean, presumably she died after them?
Before.
She died before. So
she was less decomposed.
And she's less decomposed than they are. Yeah, okay, that is weird.
So, Neil, what happened to Mercy Brown after her death? ? Title of the next bit.
I assume they chopped off her head and burnt it or something ridiculous.
Hopefully, if they knew what they were doing. The doctor tried to explain to the townspeople that Mercy Brown's preserved state was not unusual. After all, she'd been buried during the cold winter months. So there you go. It's just basically, she was in a freezer. Nevertheless, superstitious locals insisted on removing...
That's why I break into morgues with a flamethrower, Chris, without hiding all the vampires.
It's not the only reason, is it?
Oh, what? Cold things decompose less quickly.
There you go.
So you're part of the conspiracy. Yeah, you're burning too.
Get my super soaker full of paraffin.
I say flamethrower, yeah, I mean...
super soaker full of paraffin.
Water pistol with lighter fluid and a lighter.
You just got a deodorant can and a lighter. So, nevertheless, superstitious locals insisted on removing both her heart and liver and burning them before reburying her. The ashes were then mixed with water and fed to Edwin. Who's Edwin?
That's
the son who went to... That's the one who went to Colorado Springs, yeah. Unfortunately, this supernatural concoction did not cure him, and as people had hoped, Edwin died a mere 2 months later.
Probably, if anything, it's probably made him worse. Probably would have turned into a vampire and then would kill the rest of the family. Well, if there was any left.
Yeah.
By this point, they'd all died.
And here there's an 1896 article from the Boston Daily Globe. That's terrible. That describes how prevalent fears about vampires have become in Rhode Island around the time of Mercy Brown's vampire incident. And the banner headline says, "Believe in vampires. Rhode Islanders who are sure they do exist. Instances told of where the living have been attacked and preyed upon, these representatives of an unseen world." And there's a little...
Examples?
No, not yet. But there's a little kind of etching or wood block thing of a member of the anti-vampire party. Don't know, just like a bloke with a stick. So, such practices of digging up and burning the deceased over fears of vampire-like creatures were not uncommon in many Western countries until the early 20th century. While Mercy Brown's case was far from an isolated incident, her exhumation came at the end of an era for those vampire-inspired rituals.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, this is just anti-vampire discrimination.
Anti-vamps.
Yeah. They've got their own lifestyle and culture, and and religious nutcases can't just let people be people.
Exactly. So, headline, The Last New England Vampire. While Mercy Brown had a very short life, we can assume her legacy as the last New England vampire will live on forever, thanks to the stories passed down over the years. Her surviving relatives reportedly saved local newspaper clippings and family scrapbooks, and often discussed the story on Decoration Day, when the town's residents decorated the local cemeteries. That's the fun, isn't it?
That's a very strange one. So you'll never guess. My grandmother was a vampire. Yeah, last one in New England.
All right, give me some more of that glitter for this tombstone.
I assume you cut out her heart and lungs and burnt them.
Yeah. Well, then we fed it to her brother and he died.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Wonderful stuff.
Then we'll die of consumption. No.
Have you got any more of that silly string for this Celtic cross over it? So today, Mercy Brown's gravesite is popular with sight-serious and curious visitors who often leave gifts behind, such as jewellery and plastic vampire teeth. I mean, the poor girl died of consumption and then got mutilated after her death. Here's some plastic vampire teeth.
So, this is the thing, posthumous fame, be careful what you wish for. It's not what you want, is it? It's
once there was even a note which read, and it's your catchphrase, Neil, you go, girl.
Yeah, nice.
I didn't know you'd been there.
And there was some finger clicking.
Clearly, none of this was happening during the vampire scare of the late 19th century. Even though the German scientist Robert Koch had discovered that bacteria would cause tuberculosis in 1882, germ theory had only begun to take hold a decade later. As the contagion was better understood, infection rates then began to go down as hygiene and nutrition improved. Until then, people resorted to pointing fingers at alleged vampires like Mercy Brown, even when they were no longer alive to defend themselves. Easier to win a court case that way. Wait for the person to die.
Yeah, it's almost like acting like a rampant idiot in the middle of a pandemic. Actually,
That's not something that we'd see these days.
Yeah, you wouldn't see modern parallels, obviously. So that's good lord. Yeah.
At least they said vampires rather than a shadowy global elite of paedophile devil worshippers and people putting microchips in vaccines, which is what people say these days.
Asking questions. God, yeah, I can't remember what it was on now, but yeah, somebody was trotting out that line about Bill Gates profiteering from vaccines or whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, I do like the idea that, well, as somebody pointed out, just banging on about they're obviously putting microchips in the vaccines to keep an eye on us as they're typing all this into fucking Facebook.
Yeah, someone put up a thing.
I wonder whether they do anything to sort of like.
Someone put up something on Facebook the other day. Someone who puts stupid stuff up quite a lot, like not bad stuff, but just and it was someone in America had like a sign, like a painted sign outside their house saying, we can afford, we can vax the world, but we can't feed the poor. And I thought, yeah, good sentiment, except for the fact that like 4% of Africans have been vaccinated. Do you know what I mean? It's like we haven't vaxxed the world. Like, I agree with your sentiment. We can clearly do stuff that isn't being done. But I mean, just because most of America and Europe's been vaccinated doesn't mean we've vaccinated the world. So I think before sort of critiquing everything, you should probably...
You say that, Chris, but they did for smallpox. There's nothing wrong with smallpox.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Left-wing conspiracy.
That's true.
That's why all the men are so weak now.
Yeah, smallpox used to make you strong.
Smallpox, make you eradicate the weak. Get us on our toes. Bring it back. That's what I say. Do you know what? And I say,
also, you wouldn't have Instagram.
I would absolutely not. I could see somebody coming out of that now. Whatever fucking batshit lunacy coming out.
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? Like, if we still had smallpox, you wouldn't have Instagram.
They'd bring back smallpox. Brilliant.
Because everyone have like really pockmarked faces. So
good.
Yeah, good. Exactly. Maybe...
Not having pockmarks is a political decision. Fucking lefty communist cunt.
So, Neil, now let's dive in a little deeper to the Great New England Vampire Panic. And this is from the Smithsonian Magazine.
Anyone would know it'd be Smithsonian. Very fancy.
Very, very fancy. That's America's biggest museum, isn't it? It's that or Ripley's Believe It or Not. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Which one's which? Ripley's Believe It or Not has like a Model T Ford, and the Smithsonian has the man with 3 bollocks or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So, 200 years after the Salem witch trial, farmers became convinced that their relatives were returning from the grave to feed on the living. Smithsonian Magazine. So, children playing near a hillside grave mine found the first graves. One ran home to tell his mother, who was sceptical at first, until the boy produced a skull.
All right, well, now that certainly escalated. So firstly, again, stop sending your kids to graveyards to play.
No, they've got all the nice decorations.
What is this? What?
Americans' obsessions with combining playgrounds and graveyards.
You're just asking for trouble. You're just going to raise an army of demonic children.
Or Maple Hill, that was the same. And
exactly.
There's loads of them, yeah. I mean, if you're not... I would consider it part of a communist conspiracy to have publicly funded playgrounds for kids to play in. So let's just
let them knock around the gravestones.
Stick some swings on the gravestones.
Send a load of school-age kids to a graveyard. It's to go and kick the shit out of some vampires.
Yeah, exactly.
Govern.
Okay, so because this was Griswold, Connecticut, in 1990. Police initially thought the burials might be the work of a local serial killer named Michael Ross and taped off the area as a crime scene. Again, if there's a local serial killer, why are your kids out playing in graveyards?
Hang on a second. We got kids playing graves. We got so the locals. What's the local serial killer? How's he involved?
Michael Ross. So the kids found like graves and a skull, and the police thought, oh, there's a serial killer killing people around this area at the moment, so it could be to do with that.
They've only got one skull, though, haven't they, thus far?
Well, that's all they brought. But the kid brought that as proof that they'd found stuff.
Okay.
So, but the brown, decaying bones turned out to be more than a century old. The Connecticut state archaeologist, Nick Bellatoni...
whatever they call it, haven't they, hasn't he? Huh? Little bastard. He's been down the ossuary or whatever they call it. Wasn't he? So you know when they bury people, and then they dig them up after a while and they stack the bones. I think it's called an ossuary.
Oh, did I?
Well, so because on plots, I think normally in a lot of graveyards you can't. After a number of years, they will they will just dig up the bones and just shove them into a sort of like a much smaller area. I think I believe so. Yeah,
they did it in Manhattan or something. Yeah, stick it in the ossuary.
Yeah, well, I think that's all over the world actually, but because you won't, otherwise you wouldn't have it. You'd run out of space for putting more people into the graveyard, I guess.
Yeah. I don't just burn them. Get down to Creme. You going down Creme? Yeah, let's go down to Creme. So
then you're going to have less vampire problems as well. You see,
exactly. That's why
cremation safe. It makes sense.
So the Connecticut state...
Or, as we've already explored, like a Viking funeral getting fired out of a cannon.
Into the centre of town.
All good options.
Filled with fireworks.
Yeah.
So the Connecticut...
It's not worth taking a chance. Just, you could come back as undead. Why take the chance?
Don't know. I guess it's just some people are funny about their bodies being burnt. When they're dead, they could have beliefs around it.
You wake up in a coffin and you spend eternity sitting in a little box.
Well, as we've discussed, I'm going to be mummified and interned in that little walk-in wardrobe of Van Hoogstraten's. What have you called it?
Erected at the back.
Erected at the back. So, the Connecticut state archaeologist Nick Bellatoni soon determined. That sounds like a good 70s, 80s series. The state archaeologist Nick Bellatoni, be like Petrocelli or Quincy or something like that. But he's solving cold cases.
Absolutely, it's just every week random bodies are turning up at the graveyard.
Yep. Kids are running in with new skulls. So he soon determined that the hillside contained a colonial-era farm cemetery. New England is full of such unmarked family plots, and the 29 burials were typical of the 17th and early 18th century. The dead, many of them children, were laid to rest in thrifty Yankee style, in simple wood coffins without jewellery or even much clothing, their arms rested by their sides or crossed over their chests. Except, that is, for burial number 4.
Oh.
Bellatoni was interested in the grave even before the excavation began. It was one of only 2 stone crypts in the cemetery, and it was partially visible from the mine face. Scraping away soil with flathead shovels and then brushes and bamboo picks, the archaeologist team worked through several feet of earth before reaching the top of the crypt. When Bellatoni lifted the first of the large flat rocks that formed the roof, he uncovered the remains of a red-painted coffin and a pair of skeletal feet.
Nice.
They lay.
I thought we were going to find an undead woman in there.
Yeah. And he married her. They lay, he remembers, in perfect anatomical position. But when he raised the neck stone, Bellatoni saw that the rest of the individual had been completely ... rearranged. The skeleton had been beheaded. Skull and thigh bones rested atop the ribs and vertebrae. It looked like a skull and crossbones motif, a Jolly Roger. I'd never seen anything like it, Bellatoni recalls.
In all his years.
In all my years as the Connecticut state archaeologist, I'd never seen anything like it. Subsequent analysis showed that the beheading, along with the other injuries, including rib fractures, occurred roughly 5 years after death. Someone had also smashed the coffin. Ugh. The other skeleton and the graveside hill were packaged for a burial, but not JB, as the 50-ish male skeleton from the 1830s became to be called because of the initials spelt out in brass tacks on his coffin lid. He was shipped to the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Washington, D.C. for further study. Meanwhile, Bellatoni started networking. Oh, nice. That's Bellatoni for you, isn't it? Never drops the ball, networking. Started asking...
Either networking or screaming, pick him up!
Get the lid off! Show me the skeletons! He's just like... Hey, can we connect on LinkedIn? So he invited archaeologists and historians to tour the excavation, soliciting theories. That's the oldest trade on earth, soliciting theories. Simple vandalism seemed unlikely, as did robbery, because of the lack of valuables at the site. Well, if it was a robbery, there would be a lack of valuables at the site. I would point out Bellatoni.
He's not the sharpest tool in the box.
No, that's why he's only the Connecticut archaeologist.
Puts his best foot forward. He's a trier, bless him. God loves a trier.
Finally, one colleague asked, ever heard of the Jewett City vampires? In 1854, a neighbourhood in Jewett...
Bellatoni ain't heard of Jewett City vampires.
You think I ain't heard of them? I fucking invented them! In 1854, in neighbouring Jewett City, Connecticut, townspeople had exhumed several corpses suspected to be vampires that were rising from their graves to kill the living. A few newspaper accounts of these events survived. Had the Griswold grave been desecrated for the same reason? In the course of his far-flung research, Bellatoni placed a serendipitous phone call to Michael Bell, a Rhode Island folklorist, who had devoted much of the previous decade to studying the New England vampire exhumations. I assume as well as doing a job. The Griswold case occurred...
What's his job?
That was... Where's he getting his funding from?
Money for anything these days.
Money, old rope. Yeah, he probably had a YouTube. The Griswold's case occurred at roughly the same time as the other incidents Bell had investigated, and the setting was right. Griswold was rural, agrarian, a bordering southern Rhode Island where multiple exhumations had occurred. Many of the other vampires, like JB, had been disinherited, grotesquely tampered with, and rebirthed. In light of the tales Bell told of violated corpses, even the posthumous rib fractures began to make sense. JB's accusers had likely been rummaging around in his chest cavity, hoping to remove...
burn some stuff and then make a fake medicine, haven't you?
Yeah, and perhaps burn his heart. Having a nice old rummage.
You're the little old lady next door. Force them.
Here you go, have some heart ash.
Yeah.
Mixed with goat's blood. We're Christian. Headquartered in a charming old schoolhouse.
I don't remember anything in the Bible about vampires.
Don't you?
I'm sure they're in there somewhere.
I think you're forgetting...
Probably the book of...
Think you're forgetting Judas?
Yeah.
The first vampire?
That's actually, that's a plot of a movie.
I know.
There's Butler in it, yeah. Yeah, Judas.
So, headquartered in a charming old schoolhouse, the Middletown Historical Society typically promotes such fortifying topics as Rhode Island, grist mill restoration, and Stonewall Appreciation Days. Sounds good. We should go there. 2 nights before Halloween, though, the atmosphere is full of dry ice vapours and high silliness. Fake cobwebs over the exhibition.
That's a great grace.
Warty gourds crowd the shelves, and a skeleton with keen red eyes cackles in the corner. We'll turn him off when you start talking, the Society's president assured Michael Bell, who is readying his slideshow. Bell smiles. Although his lectures across the countries have taught at colleges, including Brown University, he's used to people having fun with his scholarships. Vampires have gone from a source of fear to a source of entertainment, he says a bit ruefully. Maybe I shouldn't trivialize entertainment, but to me, it's not anywhere as interesting as what really happens. Bell's daughter, a 37-year-old Gillian, a member of the audience that night, made a futile attempt to tempt her father with the Twilight series, but there's Buffy and Twilight, and there's what my dad does, she says. I try and get him interested in the pop culture stuff, but he wants to keep his mind pure. Indeed, Bell seems only mildly aware that vampire appearing everywhere from True Blood to Vampire Diaries has once again sunk its fangs into the cultural jugular. As far as he's concerned, the undead are always with us. The picture of him here in a graveyard being lit by a torch. And who does he look like? He looks a bit like Ian McKellen.
Ian McKellen was a secret vampire hunter.
So this goes on quite a lot.
Yeah, I don't think we want to go through the whole thing. I mean, so
I can basically towards the end. It's a long old
pieces here. Yeah. So basically, I think what we're saying here is that they were thinking that there were a bunch of vampires who were. I mean, I don't know if this is all tied into sort of consumption, kind of like being spread around at the time, but and that was the predicate of sort of people dying and causing these kind of panics. But they were presumably thinking that these these corpses were coming back out of the grave.
Yeah, that's unspecified.
And killing folk and then sort of going back for a nap.
It seems like they weren't really sure how they were doing it. Whether they were
I don't know what kind of. Yeah, I don't know
whether they were doing it via sort of some unknown Mycenaean family connection. Don't know. Yeah. It doesn't. What's this?
It reminds me a little bit. There was a panic in sort of Europe or in Britain around the same time where they thought that people were being buried alive. Well, actually, probably in America as well, because Edgar Allan Poe, I think, was obsessed.
Well, that's why people started having bells attached, so they'd have a pipe that went down into the coffin with and then attach a bit of string, and there'd be a bell next to the gravestone, so that people, if they woke up and had been buried alive, could pull the thing and it would ring the bell, and that's where the phrase "dead ringers" comes from.
Oh, there you go.
So it says here. It says here that. So this gives you an idea of the kind of zeitgeist at the time, I guess. So, while New England farmers may have been guided by something like reason, the spiritual climate of the day was also hospitable to vampire rumours. Contrary to their puritanical reputation, rural New England since the 1800s were a fairly heathen lot. Only about 10% belonged to a church. Rhode Island, originally founded as a haven for religious dissenters, was particularly lax. Christian missionaries were at various points dispatched there from more godly communities. The missionaries came back and lament that there's no Bible in the home or no church going whatsoever, says Linford Fisher, a Brown University colonial historian. You have people out there essentially in cultural isolation. Mary Olive, Lena's sister, joined the church just 2 weeks before she died. In place of organised worship, superstition reigned. Magic springs with healing powers, dead bodies that bled in the presence of their murderers, people buried shoes by their fireplace to catch the devil if he tried to come down the chimney. They nailed horseshoes above their doors to ward off evil and carved daisy wheels, kind of colonial hex signs, into their door frames. So it sounds like they'd fucked off religion at this point and gone back to paganism.
Well, you should try and trusted methods, because I tell you what, we put that horseshoe up. Since we put that horseshoe up on the devil's not done it once.
No.
So you tell me.
Well,
that's just science.
Well, it's
how many times have you seen the devil visiting this house?
Well, your house,
yeah.
Several, but that's because you invited him.
That's because I summoned several occasions
during one of our sex magic parties.
Well, yeah.
Crowley-esque style sex magic. No, the thing is, all of this, it's basically Pascal's wager, isn't it? Do I believe in the devil? Not really. But does it harm me to bang up some horseshoes over every door, bury some boots under the chimney, carve a daisy wheel into my front door of my rented flat? No, it doesn't cost me anything, and if it does work, then that's great.
Yeah.
So,
and he was French. You can tell he was smart.
Yeah, definitely. So, this Smithsonian thing's too long, so I'm not going to read through it. But if people want to have a look at it, then
self out, really.
Yeah, knock yourself out. I've got better things to do in my day. So, Neil, shall we go through our it's being introduced this year to colleges around New England, our scoring system.
Yeah, in place of their belief in vampires.
It's in tandem with it.
Oh, right, okay. You want to keep the old things flourishing.
So, Neil, I'll let you go first with Spookiness.
And there we go. So, apologies for this being out late and there not being an episode last week. We were going to do a mailbag, but we got literally no questions in and didn't have time to write the questions as well as answers this time. But, is what it is. And if you've got, we can always do one if you want to send us a message on herb.legends.podcast@gmail.com. We answer anything. And, that's it for this episode. There'll be one out at the normal time on Thursday. And there might be, no promises, there might be like a bonus at some point for mainly our British viewers, I guess, about the election, because Neil and I are quite excited to live in a country with a mild amount of hope in it, rather than just being ruled by corrupt people who are incompetent as well. The best kind of corruption seems to go hand in hand. But yes, that's about it. And we love you all. And sorry it's late. And there'll be more of the same coming up for a couple of weeks. All right, take care, y'all. Bye.